Going through my heat exchanger, here I'm looking at what? That's ambient sensor there. My ambient, I need to know what the outdoor temperature is so my outdoor fan knows what speed to run in. Here goes my coil temperature sensor. I know what that outdoor coil temperature is. Based on what that outdoor coil temperature sensor, based on what I'm trying to do, and in this case, what am I trying to do based on the colors here? This cycle is a representation of what? It's cooling, air conditioning. So again, where is my EEV? Here. So does the line set length and size matter?
Always matters.
It does. We can't fluctuate. I get it all. I get the question all the time. They've already run this line set and this is what I have. Can I use it? No. I can't tell you to use it because if we have a problem, guess what? It's a problem. So we have to tell you to use the correct line set. The lengths matter. Most of our products can do 49 feet. If you have to have anything a little bit taller or a little bit more robust than that, we have to go to a light commercial, which can do 98 feet. So they're very limited. Now, with there being a maximum, is there a minimum? What is my minimum?
18 foot. 30 for your hand, or is it?
9.6. What happens if I run line set less than 9.6? We pick up noise. Is noise a deal? A big deal? Most homeowners can't hear it, but every once in a while you get a homeowner that can hear everything, and it becomes an issue for us as well. Now, unfortunately, there's an ice cream shop I can take you to in my part of the world. Do you want to guess how much line set I have?
5 foot.
None. Basically, what they've done is they set the condenser here and the air handler here. The line set comes out and goes directly into what? The condenser. Did I have to point it out? I did. Had to make notes of it. They don't get any complaints, guess what? They're okay, but once the complaint comes in, we lose multiple compressors, it becomes an issue then, and I've noted that. But again, we have a minimum line set of 9.6. Now they tell us that we can take it if we need more than, if we need to, we can take it and put one loop behind the condenser. When I say one loop, that's what I mean, just one loop.
So it's strictly a noise related.
Yes.
So we shorten that on a commercial application. Like we're putting one in today, and I'm like, it's freaking 3 feet from the indoor and the outdoor.
It's a noise issue.
But it's in a big ass building where nobody's gonna care about the noise. Probably doesn't matter.
Yes, but I'm hearing say we have to follow that.
Yeah.
Yes,
So if you start doing warranty claims, you're gonna go, how long is that freaking line set?
That's exactly what I'm
And you go, oh, 3 feet,
Nobody
you're
can
gonna go,
complain about
oh
that.
shit.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm gonna have to do because the installation manual is there to protect us and the manufacturer. So even though it may work, guess what? We still have to follow IOMs. But if you're a cowboy, you do what we want sometimes, right?
So be safe and just wrap it around back to side. Just do
But I
that
have to
line
say this: do not take the whole 25-foot line set and wrap it, stack it up behind the
Oil trap.
condenser. Exactly, it is an oil trap. What happens with that is that system will work great for about a month. Then guess what it does? It goes haywire. It will not cool. And why won't it cool? Because now the oil is acting as a metering device. We can't move the refrigerant like we're supposed to. So have we had that? Yes, sir. We run it in heat cycle for about 10, 15 minutes. Clears it up, it'll run good for about another month, and then again becomes an oil cycle again, that oil loop trap again. So yes, do not take a whole, no more than one loop, and that's it.
Just one loop.
And make it as big as the back side of the unit, if that makes sense. You should be able to hide it. But the easiest solution to that is just move the condenser down just a little bit and run your line set that
And it
way.
doesn't look stupid.
Huh?
And it doesn't look like you bought a Mr. Cool.
Because I'm gonna be honest with you, even though my IOM says that you can do one loop, what's the next guy who's trying to impress the homeowner going to do?
Look at that, that looks stupid, yeah.
You're gonna point it out, he's gonna tell him it's wrong, even though it isn't wrong. So my thing is, let's just move the condenser down and get that 9.6 feet that I need, and let's be done with it from there.
So not 2 loops or 3 loops,
No, just one.
just one.
If you do any more than that, it becomes an oil
What
trap.
about 4 loops?
You've really got some.
See you in 30 days.
And we, honestly, I get it on the phone, I've had it unfortunately, I've had it on some people who actually work for the company. My unit's not working, you run out there and guess what? They didn't wanna cut the line set, and they thought they were doing well, so what they done, even though it's not behind the condenser, they shoved it up underneath the house, the whole rest of the 25 foot. But a loop is a loop, right? What, an oil trap is an oil trap, it still does the same scenario, so we have to straighten it out or cut it down.
But one more question now. I know they vibrate a little bit. Now, if you ain't soldered in, if you know, it's a flat fit, and then won't that, if you, that loop, don't that supposed to, well, I'm reading it, that was not a vibration loop.
If you torqued it right, it should vibrate.
No, I haven't seen our line sets vibrate from that standpoint, because if I look at this condenser, these base valves are basically what? They're bolted in place. The only thing that's making that line set move, is, let's be honest, is the movement of the refrigerator.
Yeah, what about on those?
Those, that's a whole different animal there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ultimately, we're here, you know, talk about the Samsung product. Now, if you can run a short line set, yes, you're gonna have vibration because of the way this system is designed. But again, most inverters are probably gonna be the same way, except for, I think someone said Mr. Cool, because they send, quick connects on their line sets, you just bolt them in. So how many of you reckons out there with a lot of, leftover piping on them?
Every one of us. Yeah, they told me, they
Yeah, they're Pierce valves.
Yeah, they are. But again, Samsung will only allow us to do one loop with a minimum, we need a minimum line set of 9.6 feet. And it's not really the move, it's really not the vibration of the compressor causing that, because ultimately, there's very little vibration in that compressor, it's the movement of the refrigerator that's causing your movement.
Yeah, because I had a Samsung, the 3-ton, it's got the two fan motors.
Yes, sir.
So I look like I might make a trip back in.
Yes, sir. I would, because what's gonna happen, it becomes an oil trap, and that becomes an issue for you there eventually later on. As long as it's one loop, you're fine. Now, don't go to our training lab, because ultimately, I didn't follow the guidelines because it's a training lab. I made the runs very short. Please do not look behind this one, because there's a 25-foot line set behind that one. I give you what not to do. If you look behind there, yes, it's all wrapped up.
Chances are that it's probably not running for a month though.
It hasn't run for a very long time. It has been in a warehouse until yesterday. It got shoved onto the trailer.
Gotta turn the heat on for a little while.
Yes, that's it, right. But again, probably the way I drove yesterday, it probably wouldn't have mattered. It probably won't have to run anyhow.
Well, then, all right, let me try one more thing. So then, right now, what I'm gonna have to do is go ahead and pump that thing down, reflare the lines.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Don't worry about it until it becomes a problem.
How long is your line set? Is it longer than 9?
Yes, sir.
Well, you won't, you just.
What you basically do is you
don't have to have a loop.
9.6, but you use the flare fittings for each line to keep from having the flare on each end.
Yeah, but I was told that that's how I'm supposed to do it.
No, sir.
Always do
So-
on your lines.
So also I have to back that up as well, because we do not ask you to use the flare nuts on that piping. If you have a line set that is pre-flared, we're gonna ask you to cut that off and use the flare nuts that are on the equipment.
You don't want us using the flare nut, or just don't want us using that flare?
I don't
Flare
want
nut's
you
a
to use
flare
either
nut.
one. I don't want you to use either one. Because that nut right there has a lot more beef to it.
Yeah.
Because I've been that guy that is over tightened before I used torque wrenches and cracked those flare nuts that come on those line sets. Anybody else had that issue before? Just me?
Crack.
But now, I'm from the farm, so we tighten everything till it squeaks, and then we tighten some more. But again, until I started using torque wrenches, I've cracked them. But ultimately, we do not want you to use that. We don't want you to use that flare nut on that pre-existing line set. We want you to use the flare nut that comes with
Come with the lines.
Comes with the equipment.
Come with the equipment, not on the line.
Not on the line set. So I'm here to throw all kind of bubbles in here today about the line set. I'm not dissing it. Have I done it before? I have. Yes, sir, I have. But we can't trust that flare to be a 45-degree flare and to be done properly from that standpoint. So ultimately, what's gonna happen is if you ever see us do it, we'll cut that flare nut off, we'll throw it in my bag, and we'll take the flare nut off the outdoor units and the indoor units and use those flare nuts. From there's all that debris gonna go. It's gonna go straight to the four-way valve. Going to go straight to my EEB. Does it cause any problems? Maybe not at first, but what happens to that debris when it gets to that compressor?
Destroys the compressor inside.
Now we change the oil. We change the color of the oil. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. So everybody says, why do we use flare nuts because we don't want brazing done on the product. Mr. Cool, in my opinion, has a great idea. The problem is their line sets are too long for us to do that. In the early days, in the 80s, ultimately, most line sets were quick connects. You didn't do vacuuming. You pierced a line set on both ends. There was no vacuuming being done in the 80s. How long did that equipment last?
Forever.
Now.
It's still out there. Some of it's still out there. So ultimately, what we're doing sometimes is detrimental. One of those things is brazing. Not so much with R22 because mineral oil don't give us that problem. But when we start using PVE or POE oil, guess what we do with all that debris if it's on the inside of that pipe? We clean that pipe. We scrape it off. So now it goes into our system. So now we start running into some issues. If we don't pull a good vacuum, what is one of the things that we're going to have to worry about?
Moisture messes up the POE oil.
What is POE oil?
It's a hydroscopic oil which absorbs the moisture.
It was actually an acid that was dehydrated to become an oil. So whenever we add moisture to it, guess what we do? It becomes an MRE. Everybody knows what an MRE is?
You ready to eat?
Yeah. What happens? What do you add to an MRE to make it ready to eat? Water. So if I add water, I now went from an oil to an acid to the product. That acid is going to do nothing more than sit there and eat those windings up. And what's going to happen? We're going to lose the compressor. And who's going to get the blame for the compressor? We are. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you.
Not in front of the customer, Samsung.
No, because the homeowner's going to hear Samsung has a problem. Samsung, they got this, they got that. And let's be honest with you, we have problems. Everybody has problems, right? Let's be honest. Those things, and that line set has to be a certain length. We want you to use the flare nuts that are on the equipment, unfortunately. We'll talk about tools a little bit because there are some special tools we ask to be used. But again, when we start looking at these thermistors, now when I get in here, I've got a return air thermistor here. It's going to tell me what that return air temperature is, what we're reading. But also at the same time, I have an entering coil temperature and an exiting coil temperature sensor. I know what that coil is doing at all times. But how do you see that information?
So it's just a supplier temperature sensor, it's just a coil on each end of it. Okay.
The only thing that's telling us what anything is a return air temperature sensor. Do we have sensors in other products that tell us what supply air is? We do. I think you're dealing with a multi-position air handler. It has a return air sensor in the middle and then 2 inlets and outlets. It doesn't have anything for supply air. Could we add some? Some products we can. We want to know what that supply air is, what we call discharge temp, because we can set discharge temp sensor temperatures on some products. So it is available in some of them. But again, a very simple circuit, right? So what is this coil here? It's a pass-through. There's nothing metering whatsoever on that indoor coil. Any questions about any we've covered so far? Oh, y'all tired of hearing me already?
No.
Nope, not really.
All right, so we got more coming. Electrical flow. What does electricity do for us? It gives us power. We power everything up. Do we take it for advantage? Very much so. Not sure if y'all lost power here recently. But I can assure you that when we lose power around my home, my wife lets me know and reminds me every 15 minutes. We don't have power. We don't have power.
Don't open the refrigerator.
Huh?
Don't open the refrigerator.
Don't open the refrigerator. Don't go in the freezer. Don't open the door if we ain't got to. But again, she keeps me reminded. What are these?
Keep telling me.
Huh?
Tell me.
These are what makes everything difficult, right? These are the control boards that we use. This particular board here has one function and one function only. We call that an EMI board. It is to clean up the power going in of the product. So if I've got 230 volts going in, what should I have coming out? A very simple check for that. Should have 230 volts going out. Now here, I got to even look at this to make sure I've got this right. This is an outdoor control board. This is an indoor control board. This is a sub control board for a free joint multi. This is the main control board for a free joint multi. And then we have inverter boards there as well, and then indoor control boards. This indoor control board is used in our 4-way cassettes and some of our slim dubs. They all do the same thing though, they're just different looking. So if I have sensors, if I have 3 sensors on this board, how many sensors do I have on this board?
3.
I have 3. It's the same principle, just different looks. Now here I have to point out, everybody see that transformer right there? What looks like a transformer? That's because we're rectifying voltage in this board as well. If I've got 230 volts coming into this board, it's now inverting. My evaporator fan motor is powered by what?
DC.
It's powered by DC voltage. It's called a DC link voltage. So we have to be mindful of that as well. Again, a lot of control boards, but they all do the same thing, just different looks. RAC outdoor PCB, SMPS inverters. This is the most important part whenever changing an inverter control board. What are these 2 items right here? These 2 plates. Those are my IGBTs. My IGBTs produce a lot of heat, so what do they connect to? The heat sink. The heat sink is nothing more than an aluminum block. That's all it is. But between the aluminum block and this inverter control board, we have to have grease. We have to have a dielectric grease. The reason is because these are not, how can I put it, true. That makes sense, they're pitted. So whenever I take that and I directly put them onto a heat sink, do I have good contact without grease?
No.
I don't. I've got some valleys, some pits in there. So that grease evens that playing field up and allows me to transfer heat where it needs to be from that standpoint. So what happens if I don't put grease on a brand new inverter control board?
It'll overheat.
Huh?
It'll overheat.
If you're lucky, you can get out the yard for about 2 or 3 days.
It'll ruin that chip.
If you're unlucky, times you power it up and bring on the compressor, guess what you hear? A pop. So again, we have to make sure we use grease. Anytime you order an inverter control, I don't care whoever it is, there's always grease involved. For Samsung particularly, if you order a board from us, make sure you tell them you need the grease as well. Don't let them tell you, oh, it doesn't come with it, or whatever. You make sure the grease is there, because if you don't have grease, I don't want you putting a new board on.
Okay, but from the factory, when you get one new, it's already got
Yeah,
that.
so you don't have to do anything. This is
You
replacement.
change it with
Yes.
the grease, and the grease goes
Yes, sir. So
at the base of where it mounts on in there, or what?
it's a heat sink, and we'll open this up later on, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about as far as the heat sink. But one of the questions, or one of the same topics we talked about here was, what is my common problems? So what do you think my common problem is?
No grease.
Overheating. The grease isn't there. Now the
Now, are
same.
those, replaceable, like, can you pull that out and put a new one in, or is that all soldered in?
Inverter or
I think he's talking about those little squares on the.
the plates here, unfortunately, here goes a board here for you. There's no soldering in the field. Basically, you want to put the grease on that plate and also on the heat sink itself. Now, the heat sink's kind of unusual because all it is an aluminum heat sink. I've had to put larger screws in there before to make them tighten. One of the problems we have is, remember I talked about farm tight squeaking? Those screws you can ring them off, or you can strip the holes out, so be careful on that as well. Use the right size screwdriver, if that makes sense. Anybody try to use an oversized Phillips screwdriver or undersized to a Phillips screw, what does it do? Again, I've had to order all 6 new screws because of that before. And they're available if you need them, so pay attention to that as well. But again, we'll look at that more closely, but this is, I've got power in, power into the valve, I'm powering up the 4-way valve. So we talk about the 4-way valve, what voltage does the 4-way valve work off of?
DC.
That's right.
120.
240.
Ah,
240
my
volts.
next guess.
When is the last time you seen a 240 volt solenoid on a unit? Last time I can count is a horseshoe package unit. Anybody ever seen one of those? And but again, do they go bad? Yes, they do. It's not something that we can't say doesn't happen. They will happen. What do we energize the reversing valve? What mode do we energize the reversing valve in? in heat.
Yeah, he,
In heat.
well, he, blood, okay,
Same as Rude.
yeah,
If you think about it, and I know this is going off in a different direction, most of your commercial products are energized which way?
in air,
In heat.
wait a minute.
A lot of commercial products in the 80s and 90s, they used a conventional setup. A W1 energized the relay, which energized the compressor contact, and energized what? The reverser valve. Why do you think we do that?
So you would have air.
You'd always have air.
Yeah, that's what I'm
And
saying.
you have electric strips for heat.
Yeah.
So most people can get warm, you just can't get cool. So ultimately, that's why we have it. So when we look at this board, again, what is my reactor? My reactor, it looks like a transformer. How many of you ever called it a transformer? It is a reactor, or a choke, or any other thing. F1, F2 communication. Now, one of the things we're different than anybody else on for mini splits is how many wires does it take for us to hook up an indoor to an outdoor? We have 3 power wires. We have 2 L1, L2 and a ground, so that's about 14.3. But what do we have different than everybody else? We have an F1 and F2 communication feed. Why do you think we have an F1, F2 communication? It gives us a little bit more versatility. We can do a lot of other different stuff that some others can't do because we're using the same platform, RS-485 connections that we're using in our commercial stuff. So what happens is, right now, with our newer product, if I've got a thermostat or a wall controller, this wall controller can be used for my commercial, can be used for my residential, right? Just have to have a sub-PCB, but it gives us those capabilities as well. It also gives me a little bit different service tool, we'll talk about that later, which is called SNet. So I can actually, remember those sensors I was telling you about? I can see every one of those sensors at one time through my computer. Doesn't have to be an expensive computer, but we can do that. Again, I have my F1, F2, my SNPS, my EEV, and my EEPROM. Side note on EEPROM, remember I told you whenever you order a board for an outdoor unit, make sure you get grease? Guess what else you need to make sure you get? An EEPROM chip. Because these control boards are programmed from the factory when they're installed on the product. But if I change that inverter control board, guess what I have to do? I have to be able to tell it what it is. Yes, sir.
Part number, blah, 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 combo. Does that come with the grease and an EEPROM chip?
Yes, sir. That
Okay.
combo number should also follow with a model
Make
number.
sure. All right.
It follows with a model number, but we have to be careful because you're working on an older product. The newer product, AR18 or ARTs and ARBs and ARCs, that EEPROM chip is kind of up in the parts list and it's not in the combo item. We've asked them to fix it. It hasn't been fixed yet, so we have to make sure now.
So the distributor may know, hey, you're ordering a board, you need an EEPROM chip.
You need an
and they
EEPROM
should
and
spit
grease.
that out.
Those two are always what you need when you order a board for an RAC product. CAC product is different because it has an EEPROM chip for storage. So if I'm changing the board on a CAC, that EEPROM chip has to go with what? The new control board. Old EEPROM, new control. But unfortunately, when I'm looking at these RAC ones-to-ones, there's an EEPROM chip. Now the EEPROM chip could be look like a standard EEPROM, or it might be on one of these other boards. I call it a spider leg. It's a little chip with 8 legs that has to be plugged correctly into where it needs to be.
It might be on this one, I don't know. I was gonna.
I'll have to look at it. No, it's going off of this one. But it has an EEPROM chip, and we'll look at it a little bit later again.
See, you,
Go
Go ahead.
Oh, one more thing. How much, I know you say put grease, how much? Or you can't put too much, can't put too little?
It's just enough to fill the void. In other words, our packet of grease that we give you, you're gonna be limited to what you can put on there.
Okay.
We don't give you much
And should, and once you put it on there, that lasts until,
until you change the board again. Now, if you pull that board back off again, guess what you got to do?
re-grease.
You got to re-grease every time that board comes off that heat sink. That's our recommendation. Now, for me, I carry 2 types of grease. I carry one I buy from Best Buy, which is in a syringe, in case I have to have it. But other than that, when I order a board of grease that's coming in a packet, mine's being a salt packet from, remember you used to get salt packets at fast food restaurants? That's about how big it is. But it has enough grease on there for you to do what you need to do, and that's it. Can you put too much? It's a dielectric. It shouldn't carry any electricity, but it does transfer the heat.
So the chips, they don't, like, you can't pull off an old board and then pull the chip and then replug the chip, cause is it detachable or?
On the RAC product, always remember, there is no EEPROM chip.
Okay.
That's the RAC, no EEPROMs. CACs, which are like commercial, a little bit different. They do have a memory chip, so we don't have to worry about them. But most of the time, my problem is I get an E470 error code when somebody changes the control board. Guess what's missing? The EEPROM. The EEPROM has to come with any RAC product and free joint multi. CACs, again, because they're like commercial, they have an EEPROM chip already there for them. But again, just make sure you ask them whenever you order the board that it comes with one. Because last thing can happen is you drive an hour and a half out there to change the board, and guess what?
You don't have a chip.
Don't have a chip. There's nothing I can do except for tell you to order a new board. I can give you the part number, but you probably want to throw the part number at me and anything else you can because you've got a unit still not working. So, yeah.
So these boards just, they don't come with this stuff?
No, sir. And again, that is only on the RAC product. They do not, if you order a replacement board, we have to make sure that an EEPROM chip comes with it. Because if I've got a 9, 12,000 BTU, an 18, we may use the same control board. So what tells it what is different?
The chip.
The program. And the only way we can get a program in the field into a product is EEPROM chips. Now, could I do it? I hate to say yes, but what's the likelihood I could get out there to do it for you? So it'd be a week or so. So it's easier just to have the EEPROM chip ordered with the board from there.
You would think it would at least come with the grease though, I mean.
Again, if we order a combo item, we have to be very careful. And I say this to make sure you understand. The older products, if we order a combo item, comes with the grease and the EEPROM chip that's already there. Our struggle right now with Samsung is the combo item only includes the board and the grease. We're trying to make it where the combo item includes the EEPROM chip again, because it doesn't do us any good. But here's the other side. I can order a board and it has nothing on it whatsoever. The reason being is, if I've already changed that board and I have another failure, you already have an EEPROM chip in there, right? I can take that EEPROM chip out of that board now and put it in there. But I can't do it from a factory board because it is pre-programmed from the factory. It's confusing somewhat, I understand, but always just ask for the EEPROM needed. And if you are ordering for a high wall RAC, there will be an EEPROM needed on that board.
And you just unplug it, plug it.
There's two different ways, and I'll show you a little bit more. One looks like a card that you plug in. The other one looks like a chip with 8 legs on it, and you have to make sure the semicircles match. If the semicircles do not match on the board, you still get an E470 error code. So now you get the luxury of pulling that board back up again and swapping that chip around the other way. Yes, sir.
When are they gonna do the Bluetooth like everybody else?
That's coming out soon.
Yeah, we just don't have that. So again, here's my electrical flow. We're talking about boards again. This is an inverter board. What am I powering with the 3-phase AC voltage? I've got a DC link voltage and a 3-phase AC voltage, which is still DC link. When we talk about DC link, remember, what did my inverter do? The inverter changed all that power over to a DC current, right? How do I know what my DC current should be? If I know what my incoming current is, and I take that voltage and multiply it times 1.4, I know what my DC link voltage should be. So if I've got a problem and we need to know if the inverter is producing voltage, I can actually go to the fan motor and check for DC link voltage as well, and it should be roughly 200, whatever my incoming voltage times 1.4 is from that standpoint. So I know my board is producing the power. Again, we talked about this. What is this board's job here?
To keep everything
Clean it up, you
I mean,
said.
that's it. It's just to clean in the voltage. So it's a suppression, those type things. Because, again, we're dealing with DC current. If this voltage spikes, what does my DC current do? It spikes. Does DC current like spikes? No. It's a very sensitive voltage, so we deal with the choke and we deal with the EMI. Now the EMI, in some cases on the newer product, are built into the control boards. That is my indoor control board there. That's my outdoor control on a free joint multi. On the newer product, you can see a dual 7-segment display, which is gonna tell me where my error code is. We talked about error codes. Where do I get error codes from? On the outdoor unit, on some models, there's a display that will tell us. On some products, on most products, if you look at the back of your inverter control board, there's gonna be a red, green, and yellow light that's gonna be flashing in a sequence. And now we need to tell you where you find that sequence at from there. But again, those are those type of things we deal with. So, power supply in, I clean it up, change it to the inverter to my DC voltage. My SMPS provides 12 and 5 volts DC for what? My EEV works off of 12 volts. My stepper motor for my blades, actually on my heads work off of 12 volts as well. My thermistors work off of 5 volts or 3 volts, and so does my communication. So the hardest thing for us to do is figure out where my communication fault is at, RS485. RS485 is just a differential voltage between F1 and F2. One sends a voltage out, one gets the voltage coming back. It's a transmit and a receive voltage. Basically, we're looking for DC voltage differential. Some people are going to tell you you're looking for 5 volts, but if I'm calling for a product to come home, I'm looking for the differential voltage between the two. Does that make sense? We can easily see a transmit and receive if we use what we call an RS485 tool, which is what we use to connect to our product. There's actually lights on here that tells me whether I'm transmitting or receiving. Could I use it for a diagnostic tool? Very simple. If it's powered up, hook my computer, I'll be able to see transmitting and receiving. Most error codes, which are E101, E201, anybody want to take a guess what most of the problem is?
Wired backward.
This wire right here. This is my communication wire F1, F2. As you can notice, these wires are just frayed off of the end. And if I had to guess about it, most installs are done the same way. You strip this wire, you take this wire, and you put it up underneath the lug and you tighten it down, right? How many points of contact does that wire actually have? Only one. Could be 2 if you do it right, but if this wire isn't stripped long enough, doesn't go all the way top, I usually only have 1, because that plate on that screw is beveled. It's not a flat plate.
Stranded wire?
The stranded wire, what happens is when I stick it up underneath there, based on my bevel on my plate, I can only get 1 point of contact wherever this lands. 2 if I push it up high enough. That makes sense? But if I use 1/4-inch ring terminals, guess how many points I've got for that wire to touch? 5 or 6. It's a lot more. So whenever we ask, communication problems usually is this wire here, does not have a crimp terminal on the end of it, and we're not using a ring terminal to stick up underneath the terminal so we get good connection. Now I've had units been in the field for 4 or 5 years. Communication error code, I ask them about the wire and the landing. Do you know what the response is I get?
It's been working all along.
They're working all along. But what happens to wire over a period of time? It gets dirty, right? It's copper, so does it attract anything? It can get corroded. Sometimes we fix the problem by doing nothing more than removing the wire, ohming the wire out to see if it's good, put it back in, and guess what happens?
Started working.
Good.
It starts working.
You can use a horseshoe though too, can't you?
You can use a spade.
Yeah.
I'd rather you use a spade than nothing. That makes sense?
Yes.
So a fork, spade, whatever you want to call it. Fork terminal, more than better than nothing. But usually we're going to ask that some type of terminal be put on this to land it up underneath this terminal from there. So we have better contact, better less of corrosion problems from there.
Does it have a male spade connection piece? No.
The only place where you have another, a male terminal is on the top of the terminal block where we connect to it. Sometimes you'll see us connect our computer there, so it's easier. But as far as in the field, yours is a screw terminal from there. Now at the same time, talk about communication wire. What's different? Also different with this wire.
It's shielded.
It is shielded. Why would we want to shield the wire?
So it won't mess with the signal.
Correct. We are using a DC signal, so if this runs across a high voltage feed, what can we do?
Slow everything.
We can scramble it. If this wire goes in the same conduit as a high voltage wire, what can it do if it's not shielded? It can affect it. It's a magnetic. Electromagnetics can affect my communication because of the differential voltage. Doesn't take much to do that, does it? So ultimately we do use a shielded cable. Now here's the kicker to a shielded cable. Where do you hook the shield up? only on one end. And that end is at the outdoor unit. Think of the shield as a drain. If I have current coming onto that shield, where do I want to send it to? I want to send it to the outdoor unit, get it out of the system completely. If I hook the shield up on both ends, indoor and outdoor, what happens if I do get a drain onto the shield?
It's just gonna connect
It doesn't go anywhere. It has nowhere to bleed off. It's back and forth. So ultimately, this shield, and you can see it here. This shield on the indoor unit is just to be wrapped around, put a little piece of tape on it so it can't go nowhere, and then on the outside, hook that up to a terminal designated for the shield. Don't hook it up to the same connection as the ground for the power. It needs to go to a separate connection for the shield to work properly. Now, can I sit here and tell you I've ever had an issue with the shield? Not that I can tell you, because most of the time on an RAC unit, how far does this run? Up the wall and through the wall, right? But at the same time, we can have interference, so we have to make sure we talk about that as well. This is a 16-2 stranded. Can you use thermostat wire? That's your call. But if you call me up and say you got thermostat wire, guess what I got to tell you?
Figure that.
Yeah, I need you to change that for me.
Typical mini split wire where you get 4 wired, 3 4 wired, we can use that, right?
No, sir. Are you talking about like Mitsubishi and everyone else?
Yeah.
No, sir. You can use the power wire for that, L1, L2 and ground, but we can't skip off and use one of those wires for communication. It just doesn't work. Because Mitsubishi and all of them use a high voltage wire that also feeds a DC voltage through for communication, and we just can't do it. We tried it just to see what would happen. It just won't work. We have to have a separate F1, F2.
Okay, so is that's on all all Samsung installs?
Yes, sir.
So we need a specific wire for that?
For communication, yes, sir.
Shit, we're in the middle of one right now.
Man,
He said, let me get that one real quick.
I'm out.
Yes.
I'm talking that I'm out.
Who sells that besides?
Sir?
Who sells that? I'm not
It
sure.
normally comes in line set.
Yeah.
If you got the
line sets. We just used the
Your best bet here is to talk with Jason here. Some stores have this in rolls. We can cut what you need, and so most of the time when you order a brand new Samsung, the line says we have this cable already. But what you're talking about, and we can tear this unit down, we can actually go back and look at one of our control boards here.
Do they sell it in a so you can get a mini split typical Mitsubishi Daikin, whatever mini split communication wire. You can get it where it's pre-done in conduit.
Yes, sir, we won't run this in conduit with the power. In other words, whenever you do a Samsung, we have 2 different feeds. We have our high voltage, which is L1, L2, ground. We consider that our 14.3 power. If we look here, we can see it. You have voltage going into the control board, but we have a communication voltage F1, F2. This has to stay separate than your power feed.
Not in the same conduit.
Not
Yeah.
yes.
But
if you use the shield, it may be okay, but typically we're going to use.
so they're probably not. So Mecklenburg requires us to put the wire between the indoor and the outdoor in a conduit.
Yeah.
And that would be a separate conduit for your communications.
So but they might not require it because they don't make us sleeve thermostat wire in commercial applications. So I would assume we could probably just run that next to it.
Yeah, sir. Now, some cases that is UV protection. I know we have a black one that is rated for outdoor use, but this one is not rated for an outdoor use, so it would need some covering somehow.
So could you use drain line then, like clear drain line, is that possible?
Whatever you choose to use,
Okay.
as long as it's covered. Now, I'll be honest with you, most of the time what you'll see on a standard RAC product is this will actually be tucked up underneath the line set, so the UV line can't get to it. That makes sense. If it's sitting on top of it, what's the UV gonna do to that jacket? It's gonna deteriorate. It's gonna be a while, but most of the time what you'll see is this comes down the chase with the line set, and then this is strapped up underneath the line set so it can't be seen and then brought into the product from there. But it is a separate feed because of communication. So again, we're talking about here, what does my fan motors run off of? They run off of DC link voltage, same as the compressor. Again, this is my power feed, 208, 240, I have 15 volts, 12 volts, 5 volts, 0.5 volts, DC bus, 3-phase digital combinated AC. So I have a lot going on. This is a typical breakdown that we see in our service manuals. Every product has a service manual. Now, where do we get the service manual from? SamsungHVAC.com. Is there a login for you? No, sir. It is a free website, SamsungHVAC.com. You go in there, you go up under technical documents, you can actually type in your model number, and it will actually bring up a service manual. All your wiring schematics, boards, typically all of that is in there. This is what you normally see. It tells us what the connection is and what wires go to the connection. Is that helpful? It is when you're trying to trace down some condensers and some sensors and stuff like that. Same time, the service manual will have our fault codes, and the most popular fault codes will have a ladder diagram of what the problem may be and for you to check. Any questions so far? It's about 10:30. I want to take a break for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Let's take about 15 minutes.